giving speech number 10 from the Competent Communicator Manual, Inspire Your Audience. Her objectives are to inspire all of you by appealing to noble motives and challenging the audience to achieve a higher level of beliefs or achievements. She will avoid using notes, and her speech time today is 8 to 10 minutes. Please welcome Cate.
Good morning, fellow Toastmasters and guests. I want to talk to you today about justice. Unfairness in our judicial system has been a major theme of our time. The predominance of racial minorities in our jails, in our prisons, and on death row suggests systemic racial bias. Our federal sentencing guidelines, which were born of the war on drugs, have become ineffective and are viewed as harsh. There are numerous studies that suggest the inaccuracy of eyewitness identification. And DNA evidence routinely and regularly exonerates people who have been wrongly convicted. Our country is very different today than it was 40 years ago. In 1972, we had 300,000 people in our jails and prisons. Today, we have 2.3 million. We have the highest rate of incarceration in the world, and that rate is 5 to 10 times higher than in other democracies. We have over 7 million people on probation and parole in this country. And in my view, mass incarceration has fundamentally changed our world. In poor communities and in communities of color, there is a sense of despair and a sense of hopelessness that is shaped by these outcomes. The unprecedented increase in mass incarceration is not really in the violent crime categories. It arises from the misguided war on drugs. And we've gotten carried away with the rhetoric of punishment. We have 3 strikes laws that put people away for the rest of their lives for stealing a bicycle or some other low-level property crime. In my view, our current punishment philosophy does nothing for no one. And this is the orientation we need to change. We have a system of justice in this country that treats you better if you are rich and guilty than if you are poor and innocent. Wealth, not culpability, shapes outcomes. And yet, we seem to be taught this. The politics of fear and anger have made us believe that these problems are not our problems. We've become disconnected. Yet there are numerous organizations that are working to change. For the last 25 years, the Equal Justice Initiative, which was founded by Attorney Brian Stevenson, has worked to combat excessive and unfair sentencing. It has worked to free wrongly convicted prisoners and to defend other people who have been denied a fair trial. The Equal Justice Initiative represented numerous clients, primarily in states like Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. And many of the stories of their clients and their cases are chronicled in just a heart-wrenching book. It's called, aptly, Just Mercy, a story of justice and redemption. And when this book was published last year, it landed on the New York Times bestseller list, where I discovered it. And after I read it, frankly, I was disgusted by the members of the legal profession and outraged. I was outraged at the conduct of judges, the conduct of prosecutors who are indifferent to innocence, and who, frankly, are more interested in winning. I was so disgusted, I insisted my family and friends read this book, and my book club, as a matter of fact, read this book, and they were equally outraged. And it's the Equal Justice Initiative and this book that inspired my speech today. But these cases are not happening in parts of the South alone. Right here in Utah, we have the Rocky Mountain Innocence Center, based in Salt Lake City. And this center works to free wrongly convicted prisoners in Utah, Nevada, and Wyoming. And about 4 years ago, the Rocky Mountain Innocence Center freed Deborah Brown, who was wrongly convicted of murder and spent 17 years at the point of the mountain, right here in Utah. Most recently, we have the Clemency Project. That was started by the United States Department of Justice. The Deputy Attorney General called on the legal profession nationwide to accept volunteer pro bono cases for those prisoners who would more likely today receive lesser sentences under our sentencing guidelines. This is strictly in the federal system. And so this past summer, when the Utah Federal Defender's Office started a project, I agreed to accept a case. Let me tell you about my client, Rogelio Lopez Ahmad. He's 36 years old. He's been in prison just over 10 years. He was convicted and sentenced to 21 years for his part in driving a vehicle that had a number of packets of methamphetamine. It was his first offense. There were no guns. There was no violence involved in his crime. Yes, he is an illegal immigrant. He came to this country in really fortunate, misguided effort to earn more money because his wife was expecting their first child in Mexico. He's never met his daughter, who is now 9 years old. Under the Clemency Project, if you've been in prison more than 10 years and your crime did not involve violence, then you meet the criteria to be submitted for clemency by the President. It's my job to gather all the information and prepare a petition that will be compelling enough to convince the Department of Justice, the Office of the Pardon Attorney, and ultimately the President. So far, under the Clemency Project, there's been less than 100 people who've had their sentences commuted, but that number is expected to go up significantly at the end of before the end of the year and into 2016 because there are so many more attorneys who are now involved. I fully expect Rogelio to be released next year. At that time, he will be deported back to Mexico, where his family will be waiting for him. On that score, Rogelio is lucky. He has a family who is supportive and caring. Contrast that with the majority of prisoners who have been incarcerated for 15 or 20 or 25 years. When they return to society, they are left with no skills, no opportunity, no support system, no coping mechanism, and then no hope. Little surprise that they often return to crime and ultimately return to prison. We need to find ways to embrace these challenges, this suffering, and these problems. Because ultimately, our humanity depends on everyone's humanity. I've come to believe that each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. If someone tells a lie, they are not just a liar. If someone takes something that does not belong to them, they are not just a thief. And even if someone kills, they are not just a killer. And because of that, there's this basic human dignity that must be respected by any system of law. We cannot be fully evolved human beings until we understand that the survival of each of us is dependent on the survival of all of us. Brian Stevenson has concluded that in this country, and often in many parts of the world, the opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. And so, fellow Toastmasters and citizens, what can you do? First, you can examine your mindset and your belief system about the purpose and the nature of criminal justice. What is the purpose of punishment? Purpose of rehabilitation? Truth and reconciliation. Resist the politics of fear. Number two, you can lend your political support to making major reforms in laws that drive mass incarceration and also permit racial bias to go unchecked. Just last week, a bipartisan Congress proposed a new bill to reform the sentencing guidelines. And while this is laudable in some aspects, the federal prison population is only about 10% of that 2.3 million number. The majority of people incarcerated are in our state prisons and our local jails. And also, the congressional proposal will only address a small fraction of those who are in the federal system. So it's really a literal drop in the bucket. Third thing you can do, offer your resources, whatever they may be, to organizations like the Equal Justice Initiative, the Rocky Mountain Innocence Center, the Clemency Project, or others, so they can continue the work that they do to combat injustice. Ultimately, you judge the character of a society not by how we treat our rich and our powerful and our privileged, but by how we treat our downtrodden, our incarcerated, and our poor. Because it's in this nexus that we actually begin to understand truly profound things about who we are. Madam Toastmaster.